David Barry reporting for Jewish Online Magazine. Our special guest is Dov Newmark from Nefesh Bnefesh. Thanks for joining Jewish Online Magazine, Dov.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Can I begin by asking you, Dov, what does Nefesh Bnefesh mean?
Okay, so Nefesh Bnefesh is, well, Nefesh is a soul. So it's soul for a soul.
Yes. What does that mean exactly?
Okay, so the organisation was set up just over 10 years ago. Unfortunately, out of a terrorist incident that happened in Israel, where a young boy was killed, happened to be a relation of the founder of Nefesh Bnefesh, Rabbi Fass. And it was really a matter of sort of replacing that soul with another soul. And from then, over 30,000 Olim have made Aliyah through Nefesh Bnefesh. So it's a really
fantastic story.
So unfortunately, out of something bad, something great. Sort of very much in his memory has come about.
And what is the task of Nefesh Bnefesh?
Okay, so the task of Nefesh Bnefesh is really to help people facilitate their aliyah. Okay, so moving to Israel is not easy. In fact, moving from Edgware to Golders Green is not easy. Absolutely. So even more so when you're moving abroad. So it's really taking and helping people to facilitate their aliyah by giving the information that they need, advising people of their rights and benefits, helping people source employment, helping people find the right communities where they are going to be happy to live in. There was a high return rate, especially in the 70s. You know, to make aliyah is relatively easy. Under Israel's immigration laws, the law of return, if you can prove you are Jewish, Israel has an open door policy. It's slightly harder to stay there. And in the 70s, the return rate was around the 45–50% rate. Because it was hard. It was hard. But now with the support and the advice and information that's available to Olim, we've seen that the retention rate is around the 98%, especially with the 30,000 Olim that we have been able to help facilitate. Wow.
What motivates people to make Aliyah, to move to Israel?
Lots of different reasons. Parents are now going because their children have made Aliyah and they want to be near their children and grandchildren. Youngsters make Aliyah because they don't want to start a life for themselves in the UK. We have singles that go because they want to find a nice Jewish partner. They don't believe they'll be able to find it in the UK. So there's lots of different reasons.
The weather at the moment is very, very miserable in London. Do people go for the weather, would you say? Is that motivation to make Aliyah, would you say?
First of all, you have to point out that it is June.
Right.
Okay. And it is pouring of rain.
In London, yes.
London.
Yes.
Is the weather a factor? Yeah, it's one of the many factors. I don't think people are going to move purely because of the weather.
Right.
Although I think it is a factor. You know, when it's grey and miserable, people feel depressed. You know, wake up in the morning and it's beautiful sunshine. You know, puts a smile on people's faces. So you do have the flip side of that is people do ask, you know, when is it going to rain in Israel? So it's I don't think that's going to be the deciding factor.
Right.
It definitely helps.
What is the most common concern for potential new Olim, new immigrants, Dov?
Okay, I think again it depends on what age you're making Aliyah.
Right.
For the youngsters, it's very much employment.
Is it?
For the older people, it's whether they are going to be financially viable with no income streams, only their pension, if they don't have savings. So I think at every different stage of life there's different concerns, and that's where we really do help people, sort of guide them and direct them as far as budgeting, and so that they are absorbed in the areas that they want to be in.
So Nefesh Bnefesh would help people with these concerns that they have?
100%. It's a matter of giving them realistic expectations. It's a matter of painting a picture for them that is going to be realistic and where they are going to see. You know, hurdles are great as long as you know you're going to come across those hurdles. Then we can help people and give them the tools to overcome those hurdles. People don't like surprises. And that's where we sort of come in, and it's a matter of working with people so that they can make the right choice. You know, sometimes Aliyah is not right for everybody, but by working with them and changing what they're doing here will give them the tools to make Aliyah at the right time.
It's interesting, Dov, you mentioned about unemployment. I would have perhaps put up there, maybe in the top 5, maybe the language.
Okay, language is, you know, huge because because if the more Ivrit you have prior to making Aliyah, the more doors that will be open to you when you get there, whether it's socially. But
everybody speaks English there, Dov. No, and is English really a problem? Learning Ivrit a problem?
Yes, yes. As I tell people, you can get by.
You can get by.
You can get by, but if you are making Israel your focus of life, you really want to be able to speak the language and be able to communicate. You know, you want to feel that you're at home and that you're not a foreigner in Israel. So I would definitely say, definitely pre-Aliyah, the learning of Ivrit is essential.
And what are the statistics with regard to perhaps young families, senior people making Aliyah, Dov? Is there more young people? Is there more senior people going?
Okay, so what we've noticed, there's a trend over the last few years, is that less families are going, more singles are going. The retirees are always going. A lot of the Brits own property in Israel, so when the time's right, either at retirement or if they're taking early retirement, will go to those properties. The group is the young families with young kids. You've got to time it right. It's got to be right for the age of your children. If they get to a certain age, then you're starting to play with their education. So you have to go when your children are young, or if they're slightly older, the children have to have a foundation in Ivrit in order to get by, especially in their sort of early mid-teens.
Would Nefesh Bnefesh ever say to a family or a young person or senior people that I don't think making Aliyah is for you?
I think it's a matter of guiding people and pointing people in the right direction. You know, to make Aliyah to come back is not helpful to anybody. So it's a matter of giving people the tools that to keep that dream alive, and work with them that they're either in a financial position or have got a career that they're going to be successful in Israel. So we wouldn't necessarily turn around and say that Israel's not for you. It might be Israel's not for you now. Let's work together over the next 12 months so that Israel will be for you. Or, because of the age of your children, wait a year, 18 months, and then make Aliyah, so it's not going to infringe on your children's education, you know, if it's not at the right time. As I tell people, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. So it's important that the whole jigsaw puzzle fits together. Do the government and people that were born in Israel welcome new olim, new immigrants, Dov? Very much so. I mean, Israel is a country of olim. So majority of the people have been there, gone through it and come out of it, and they really do welcome olim with open arms. I think there's a difference between Aliyah of crisis and Aliyah of choice. Aliyah from Western countries such as the UK and the States is very much Aliyah of choice. These are professionals, these are career-minded people, involved people that are able to not only contribute to Israeli society but implement change, and it's very much welcomed. And I think Israel has changed over the last 20-30 years for the better because of Western influences.
Would you recommend of potential new immigrants from the UK maybe to settle in Anglo communities in Israel?
The Brits are not very adventurous, okay? Primarily because we're frequent visitors to Israel. To jump on a plane for a 4-hour flight to Israel for a long weekend or for a Chag or for a Simcha is not unheard of. So we know Israel, I would say, far better than Olim coming from other countries, especially Australia, South Africa, America, which is that much further. We also have a lot of family and friends in Israel, and we sort of gravitate to where they're living. So the Anglo communities, your Jerusalem's, Tel Aviv, your Netanyah's, Herzliyah's, Modi'in, Ra'anana's, are sort of the areas that the Brits go to.
And you would recommend for perhaps new immigrants to perhaps settle in Anglo communities rather than perhaps other communities?
I don't think it's a matter of recommending. It's sort of where people are going to feel more comfortable living. It's going to help them socially. People come to me, their dilemma is, do I go to Modi'in or do I go to Ra'anana? We know we have family, we know we have friends in both. So it's not a matter that we're going to tell people you have to live here or you have to live there, but for social purposes, if you're looking for an Anglo community, then those are sort of the Anglo communities that you will gravitate towards.
Is housing still affordable in Israel? Because I understand there is a boom and a continuing boom in properties.
There is a boom in properties in Israel. Israel wasn't hit by the subprime because the loan to value is around the 60% in respect of mortgages.
I mean, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, perhaps people could sell their properties here.
And buy without a mortgage there.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a weak pound at the moment and a strong shekel, which doesn't help if you're going from here to there. Property prices are higher, especially in the Anglo areas, because Western money is being poured into those areas, which pushes the price of property up. As I tell singles that are looking to live in the Tel Aviv or Jerusalem area that don't live in central London and paying West End prices for rents, you're going to be paying those because there's a premium for wanting to live in the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem areas. If they were to live outside of those prime areas where they do in the UK, then rents are reflected accordingly. And likewise with the Anglo areas, it's very much moving into the equivalent of your Golders Green, your Hendon, your Edgewares, which are slightly more expensive than the non-Jewish communities. You see, in Israel, every community is a Jewish community. So you don't necessarily need to be near in the Golders Green area where you're near the shuls and you're near the schools, the Jewish schools, because everywhere in Israel has the shuls and the Jewish schools. But for social networking, you would want to be near your peers.
Would you recommend renting than purchasing in the beginning, Dov?
Very much so. You never really know an area until you live in that area. You know, everybody knows that Hendon and Golders Green are the Jewish areas. Now, if you're coming from abroad and you don't really know those areas and you buy a property in Hendon and it happens to be near the Hendon mainline railway station, you're sort of out of the Jewish community, but you're still in Hendon. So until you actually live in an area and get a feel for the area and know, and also in the UK, people don't mind walking 20, 30 minutes to lunch on Shabbos. You can't do that in Israel because of the heat in the summer and the hills. So you sort of very much centre your social life around a very small radius of where you're living. So it's a matter of getting the right area. It's a lot easier to move if you're renting than if you've bought. So definitely I would recommend renting for the first 6 months to a year, or however long it takes until you're really certain of the area that you want to be in. And it's also important to rent in an area that you can potentially afford to buy in. Because otherwise, if you're in an area for 2-3 years, you build up a social crowd, especially if you've got children, and then you're looking to buy, and you have to move out of the area, then you have to start all over again.
Very sensible advice. I know this sounds a silly question, Dob, but I'll ask it anyway. After having made Aliyah, moving to Israel, when are you no longer defined as a new immigrant?
10 years.
10 years?
10 years.
Wow.
When you make Aliyah, you're entitled to certain rights and benefits. The longest right is in one of the rights that are affected with buying a property, and that's a 10-year right. So once all your rights have expired, then you're no longer considered an oleh.
Does Nefesh Bnefesh facilitate a more happy and successful Aliyah than doing it independently?
When you say doing it independently, you're talking about making Aliyah without any involvement of Nefesh Bnefesh and turning up in Israel.
Yes. Yes.
I'd like to think Nefesh have put the fun back into making Aliyah. It's very much going with the right information, and that's where we sort of come in. A lot of people that haven't necessarily had involvement with Nefesh in the UK will be in touch with us once they get to Israel, once they've heard about us. We also do a lot of post-Aliyah events as well, whether they be socially or educational, you know, because it's not a matter of just getting you to Ben Gurion Airport, it's helping you to be absorbed in Israel as well.
I was going to ask you actually, Dov, does Nefesh Bnefesh offer continuing support, maybe for those 10 years whilst you are a new immigrant?
Very much so. I mean, especially within the first year, we're very proactive. After that, there's always the events, but I think it's more that we're a organisation that is there for people, for Olim, for as long as they need us.
That's nice.
It's not that, I'm sorry, your 3 years are up, your 5 years are up, please don't call us again.
Right, that's nice.
We're there for as long as they need us. So we might not be as proactive, but we're definitely reactive if they need us after 3-5 years. Because circumstances change the whole time. You might go with a job, and after 3 years you might find yourself without a job. So you might then need to take advantage of our employment department after 3 years, after 5 years, whereas you didn't necessarily need it within that first year. Okay, you might be in a community and you might think, you know, go as a single, you're in Tel Aviv, now you're getting married and may have 1 or 2 children, and think, well, you know, Tel Aviv is not for me. So you'll come to our communities department and we'll guide you and help you and look at what you're looking for in a community and sort of recommend different communities for you to go and have a look at. So everybody has different stages in life where they would need different services.
And how is Nefesh Bnefesh funded, Dov?
So we get funding from the Israeli government. We also do fundraising.
Are you a charity?
Well. We are a charity. We're a non-for-profit, yes.
Right, right. And would you recommend a pilot trip before making any decisions, Dov?
Okay, so that's a very good question. As a rule, the answer is yes. But there are buts. Primarily, as I said earlier, we're frequent visitors to Israel. So it depends on what we're looking for on a pilot trip. When we go to Israel on holiday, we don't look at schools.
No.
Okay? We don't really look at communities. Sometimes we are going to the beach, you know, the seafronts, and we're not looking at inside the cities. So Yes, a really focused pilot trip prior to making Aliyah, with addressing the issues that are going to affect you once you get there, I would say is essential. If you're looking for work, you need to go and do some professional networking prior to making Aliyah. Not necessarily interviews, but knowing what's there, talking to people that are in the field that you want to be working in to find out who's hiring, who's firing, you know, and where areas are growing. Communities is very important as well, schools. So again, it depends on your stage in life. Even if it's a matter of going to look at properties in areas that you want to rent in, so that you can narrow down your search when you actually go there. So yes, I would say if you can, it's definitely essential. And remember, communities come to life over a weekend, whether it's religiously within shul or whether it's socially on the beaches and the clubs. So, you know, if you can go for 10 days and get 2 weekends in, it's even better still.
What do you recommend, Dov? I mean, I know there are a number of new immigrants, Olim Chadashim, where the breadwinner commutes back to the UK for work. How do you feel about that? Do you think it works?
I'm a bit of a commuter myself. I'm in the UK on a monthly visit, on a monthly basis. I come in on a Sunday, go out on a Thursday, home for Shabbat.
Right.
I think the way technology is changing, more and more of our work is done virtually.
Yes.
Now, if you can make Aliyah and have an income source, because you can sit in Israel and do your job in the UK or wherever, it's a job you know well, you can budget accordingly, you can get your feet firmly on the ground in Israel, lay solid foundations, and then look to move into the Israeli workforce. Takes a lot of pressure off you and a lot of pressure off your family. To commute to the UK is a relatively easy commute. Slightly different. My friends in the area that I live that commute to and from America on a weekly, sort of bi-weekly basis. Wow. So I think if it works for you, then it's great. If it's going to be a strain on the family, then it's something that needs to be addressed. Maybe not from day one, but definitely after a period of time.
And does Nefesh Bnefesh offer financial assistance to people that maybe can't afford to make that big move?
We do. I mean, one of the 4 pillars that we were founded on was that people couldn't necessarily afford to make Aliyah. So we do give financial grants. It's more, I don't think the grant is going to make the difference between somebody making Aliyah or not making Aliyah, but I think it will take the initial pressure off, especially the people that are going to Orpan. If you're not so familiar with the language and you can afford to take 5 months out to do one of the intensive Orpan courses, and the grant that we're able to give you will enable you to do that
during those 5 months, right?
Then that will give people a good head start in their Aliyah absorption.
And if Chas v'Shalom, the new immigrants want to return to their country of birth, Dov, would Nefesh Bnefesh help them?
Okay, so I think the answer to that question is that Nefesh Bnefesh would help people stay in Israel.
Right.
It would give them the tools and the resources and work with them. If it's an employment issue, we have a dedicated employment department. If they're living in the wrong area, we have a dedicated communities department. If it's social services that they need, we have a dedicated social services department. So we will do everything in our power to try to keep somebody in Israel, because at the end of the day, that's where they really want to be. If after all of that it still is not working, then we will give you the information that you need in order to tie up all the loose ends in Israel, in order to come back. What we'd like to think is to regroup
Right, that's nice word.
And then come back at a later stage. But yes, but hopefully, and what we've seen happen in the past, is that the retention rates are high and very few people are coming back.
And it's no coincidence that this interview, Dov, is taking place on the Shabbat where we have Parashat Shalach.
Right.
Where we're on our big move to Israel, aren't we? And it's such a fantastic place to go. Not only it's a mitzvah to go, but it's a great place to live, isn't it, Dov?
You're talking to the converted. I live in Israel.
How long have you been living there, Dov?
Just under 4 years.
Okay.
Coming up to our 4th year anniversary.
Right.
Yes, it's a phenomenal place to live. I mean, it's you're walking in history. Every step you make living in Israel. It's the Chagim, even if it's every Shabbat when you go to the supermarket, everybody wishes everybody Shabbat Shalom, whether you're religious or you're not religious. That's the greeting. It's just an incredible place to live. Yes.
And would you say, Dov, just last couple of questions, would you say there is an equal amount of religious and non-religious people that want to make Aliyah?
Very much so. Very much so. In fact, more and more non-religious people, especially singles, are making the move.
Why?
The feedback I'm getting is because if the non-religious circles in the UK is very much focused around non-Jewish circles. And if you're looking to marry somebody Jewish, you've got more chance of meeting somebody non-religious in Israel than you have here. Also, people have gone through universities, the atmosphere on campus is not so great. Do they want to start a life here in the UK?
Yeah. Does Nefesh Bnefesh run any events or any seminars that people can go to, Dov?
We run a lot of seminars in the UK. We run a series of 9 different seminars starting in October and going through. In fact, we had our farewell reception this week for people that are making Aliyah in 2012. And our seminars are very much information based. So we start off with mapping out your Aliyah, which is a seminar about what the Aliyah process is, how to start the application with the Jewish agency in order to get your Aliyah approval. And then we will do seminars on tax and financial planning, education and communities, employment and professional networking. We do a seminar on retirement, healthcare and pension. So there's something for everybody so that they are going with the right information that they need to make their absorption that much easier.
And finally, Dov, if you had a message to give to Jewish Online Magazine viewers about making Aliyah, what would it be?
I would say realistic expectations. Go with a level of Ivrit and you have the best time.
Dov Newmark from Nefesh Bnefesh, thank you ever so much for this most interesting and informative chat. It's been absolutely amazing, and I think on behalf of Nefesh Bnefesh, I'd like to encourage all viewers of this video clip to really consider making Aliyah. It's the most amazing, Israel's the most amazing country, and that's where all Jewish people belong.